I've been called a witch, a slut. And maybe people confuse me with the characters I've played.
They were more than just faces in the crowd. These women were part of rock and roll's heartbeat, inspiring songs, shaping styles, and living stories wilder than the lyrics themselves. So, today we're turning up the volume on the most famous groupies who helped define the golden age of rock. Pamela Des Barres.
To spend time with the guys in rock groups. Not necessarily sexually, but a lot of times you just want to be backstage.
Pamela Des Barres is pretty much the first lady of groupie land. If you've ever read I'm With the Band, Confessions of a Groupie, you already know her captivating story. It really is the defining memoir of the entire scene, because Pamela helped organize a legendary circle of super groupies in LA called the GTOs, Girls Together Outrageously. It was a wild and creative collective produced by Frank Zappa himself, who saw real cultural value in what they were doing.
And he would get things out of me that I didn't even know were festering in there.
Her connections were the stuff of rock legend, seriously, spanning romantic ties and friendships with members of Led Zeppelin, The Who, The Rolling Stones, The Doors, and The Byrds, among others. Far from the nameless groupie cliché, Pamela built a career as an author, a journalist, and an ordained minister, later hosting writing workshops and rock history tours, while championing this idea that groupies were muses and cultural contributors, not just background figures to stare at. Bebe Buell.
Cover me in your warm soft fire. Speak to me.
Bebe Buell was the prominent figure in the New York rock scene of the 1970s. She started out as a seriously successful Ford model, but her striking charisma quickly made her the quintessential rock and roll muse. But Bebe wasn't just a casual presence, she was a fixture at legendary spots like Max's Kansas City and CBGB. Buell's connections were absolutely A-list, crossing multiple genres. This included a long, complex, decade-spanning relationship with power pop pioneer Todd Rundgren, who was her anchor through much of the 1970s. And Bebe famously dated many icons like Mick Jagger, and she was the inspiration of Elvis Costello's classic 1977 song, This Year's Girl. She once told an interviewer, quote, "The 70s were truly the wild west of rock and roll, and she was right in the middle of it all." But Bebe's legacy is defined by more than just relationships. Her personal life made international headlines when her daughter, actress Liv Tyler, was revealed to be the biological child of Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. Liv was famously raised believing Rundgren was her dad, and this incredible twist cemented Buell's enduring, almost mythical link to two of rock's most prominent lineages. The ultimate rock and roll family tree, if you will. Now, Bebe is a writer, a rock vocalist in her own right, and a cultural commentator. She published her fascinating memoir, Rebel Heart: An American Rock and Roll Journey, in 2001, and she is still very much involved in the music scene. She's married to musician Jim Wallerstein and lives a relatively private life, all while maintaining her iconic status. Cynthia Plaster Caster.
An art space, taking you very seriously and exhibiting your work in that context.
Alright, if we're talking iconic rock and roll personalities, Cynthia Plaster Caster is one of those names that just floats around the mythology of the era. She wasn't your typical backstage groupie. She basically turned the entire scene into her art project. Her claim to fame? Well, creating, let's call them plaster portraits of famous musicians. Specifically, a personal body part. Not drawings, not photos, actual sculptures. And somehow, she made it feel less scandalous and more like a weird, brilliant piece of counterculture performance art. Frank Zappa, who always was drawn to anyone pushing creative boundaries, absolutely loved her concept. He once joked that Cynthia was the Lewis and Clark of groupie culture, and he actually helped fund her early work, because he thought her project said something fascinating about fame, ego, and art. Her very first subject was Jimi Hendrix, which is about as peak rock and roll as it gets. After that, let's just say the word spread.
See, I am a plaster caster of certain body parts belonging to men and women who make music I adore.
Musicians were curious, flattered, intimidated, and sometimes all three. But Cynthia's entire angle, it wasn't sleazy. It was oddly respectful, even scientific. She cataloged everything like a museum curator, complete with labels, dates, and notes. She said, quote, "I wanted to preserve rock history in the most literal way possible." And she became a pop culture figure in her own right. Kiss even shouted her out in their 1976 song, Plaster Caster. Which pretty much locked her legacy into rock history forever. Cynthia then shifted into making casts of female rock artists in her later years because she wanted to balance the story and show, in her words, quote, "that women are icons too." She eventually donated much of her collection to art institutions so they would be preserved as the strange, wonderful time capsules they are. Cynthia Plaster Caster passed away in 2022 at the age of 74. But today, she's remembered as one of the most unique figures the rock world has ever produced. A woman who took groupie culture, flipped it on its head, and turned it into a bizarrely brilliant piece of 20th century art. Miss Mercy. Miss Mercy, born Mercy Fontenot, was a foundational member of the groundbreaking group the GTOs. Her significance transcends the typical definition of a groupie. She was a genuine contributor to the counterculture's aesthetic, celebrated for her flamboyant, maximalist style, which involved intricate vintage clothing, dramatic makeup, and a clear rejection of mainstream fashion norms. As a high-profile figure within the LA music and art scene, Miss Mercy was a living embodiment of the era's fusion of rock music with avant-garde style. Establishing connections with many of the leading musicians at the time. While the GTOs released only one album, Permanent Damage, in 1969, their influence on fashion and the blurring of the lines between muse, artist, and fan remain a key, though often overlooked element in the history of rock and roll culture. Laurie Maddox.
Times here, I have to say.
When you see these old shots, does it make you feel any certain way when you see these things?
Oh, God, yeah.
Laurie Maddox, also known as Laurie Lightning, was a major, instantly recognizable fixture on the Sunset Strip in the 1970s. She was one of the leading figures in a controversial clique of groupies due to their age. Her signature style was pure high glam. Think platform boots, killer makeup, and an attitude to match, making her a queen of legendary hangouts like the Rainbow Bar and Grill. Her connections were straight-up rock royalty. She was famously linked to major British icons like Jimmy Page and David Bowie. She was, as rock historian Pamela Des Barres noted, a key symbol of that era's unfettered sexual and artistic freedom. However, her story is a complex, controversial slice of rock history now.
Told you I was going to be with you.
Wow, it's so dramatic.
That was it. Kidnapped into glory.
Yeah.
Her accounts detailing youthful relationships with adult musicians became central to discussions about the serious excesses and lack of ethical oversight of the 70s scene. Laurie Maddox eventually moved out of the rock scene, and nowadays she rarely speaks publicly about her 1970s experiences, though she remains an often discussed figure in rock histories and documentaries. Sable Starr. If there was ever a face of the wild early 70s Sunset Strip scene, it was Sable Starr. People called her the queen of the Sunset Strip. She was basically the teenage mascot of the glam and proto-punk world, hanging out backstage at Rodney Bingenheimer's English Disco, the hotspot where Bowie, Iggy, and every glitter-covered rocker drifted through. Sable became especially known for her intense, messy, very public connections with Iggy Pop and Johnny Thunders. Iggy even referenced her in interviews, calling her one of the unforgettable personalities floating around that early Stooges era. And many fans think Johnny Thunders wrote "You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory" about Sable. She wasn't just there either. Photographers loved her. She's in a ton of iconic glam era shots. Platform shoes, metallic makeup, the whole alien disco look. Sable basically embodied that shift from glitter rock to gritty punk. All attitude, all chaos. Sable eventually stepped away from the scene entirely, moved to Reno, and lived a quiet private life with her family. She passed away in 2009, but to this day, she is remembered as one of the most recognizable, fascinating figures from rock's most unfiltered era. Tura Satana. Tura Satana is an interesting one because she was already a tough-as-nails star, a cult actress and performer, way before the rock groupie scene even really took off. If you've seen the classic flick Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, you know her as the ferocious lead Varla. And that kinda raw, powerful persona totally fed into the emerging rock attitude. She had a background in martial arts and became a famous burlesque and go-go dancer who toured nationally. Now, the story that ties her to the rock history is a juicy one involving Elvis. This was when he was just starting out in the mid-1950s. The rumor is that she and Elvis had a very close relationship. And she claimed to have been a major influence on his iconic stage presence. She even suggested that she taught the king some of his famous pelvis-shaking dance moves. While the details are hard to nail down, the idea that this powerful woman may have helped inspire the birth of rock and roll's greatest showman is just too cool not to include. Anita Pallenberg.
I've been called a witch, a slut. And maybe people confuse me with the characters I've played.
Anita Pallenberg was never a traditional groupie. She was an uncredited artistic director for the Rolling Stones. This German-Italian model first entered the band's orbit via Brian Jones, but her background and fierce, unconventional style immediately started shaping the group's entire aesthetic. She moved them toward that rebellious image in the mid-1960s. Her ultimate legacy is cemented by her mythic, long-term partnership with guitarist Keith Richards, a true rock and roll dynasty. Pallenberg's artistic sensibilities were so respected, she was constantly in the studio. Her critiques actually influenced the remixing of the seminal 1968 album Beggar's Banquet. She was a collaborator and a muse, influencing their sound and famously inspiring classic tracks like Gimme Shelter. Keith Richards himself called her the Stone, cementing her status as an honorary member.
Couldn't drag me away.
Anita Pallenberg studied fashion and art after leaving the rock world, earning a degree from Central St. Martin's in London. She remained a creative spirit and appeared in occasional films. But Anita passed away in 2017 at the age of 75, leaving behind one of the most powerful and complex legacies in rock history. Marianne Faithfull.
Off to work, and the kids were off to school.
Marianne Faithfull wasn't just a rock muse, she was the bohemian icon of the mid-1960s. She floated into the Rolling Stones world as this elegant, upper-crust girl and ended up becoming Mick Jagger's most talked-about companion during the band's wildest years. And before any of that, she scored an early hit with As Tears Go By, one of the very first songs Jagger and Richards ever wrote.
I sit and watch as tears go by.
And Marianne was there for the chaos too. The parties, the scandals, the infamous Stones drug bust that tabloids couldn't stop talking about. But what makes her story so cool is that she didn't stay in anyone's shadow. After hitting a brutal rough patch in the 1970s, she came roaring back with Broken English in 1979. Critics called it one of the most powerful comeback albums ever. That smoky, raw voice, totally her own. Marianne proved she wasn't just part of rock history, she was a force in it. Tawny Kitaen. Tawny Kitaen quickly became a defining figure of the 1980s glam metal scene, initially realizing the power dynamics of the music industry through early exposure to backstage access. Her striking presence facilitated immediate connections, notably appearing on the 1983 debut EP cover for Rat, a connection that cemented her status with the burgeoning LA rock community. Kitaen achieved widespread public recognition not only through her high-profile relationships, but also as an emblematic video vixen of the MTV era. most famously starring in iconic music videos for Whitesnake.
Waiting on love, sweet charity.
Her association with frontman David Coverdale culminated in marriage. She also had documented associations with other major figures, including Tommy Lee and John Taylor, establishing her indelible legacy within the decadent 1980s rock landscape. Cleo Odzer.
Today's show is Cleo's adventures as a groupie.
Cleo Odzer, she stretched the groupie definition. Her initial access, music journalist for a local New York paper. Her biggest story, a hot relationship with keyboard wizard Keith Emerson. They were even supposed to get married, but then came the drama. In 1969, Time magazine labeled her a super groupie. Emerson was so freaked by the public title, he instantly broke off the engagement. Total public spectacle. After that, Cleo just kept hitting the scene, claiming connections to guys like Terry Reid and members of Deep Purple and Cream. But her real significance, she was the first to tell her own story. In 1969, she released a groundbreaking spoken word album called The Groupies. It was raw, honest, and the earliest deep dive into what life was really like behind the scenes. Cleo Odzer left the rock scene and became a writer and a cultural observer. She moved to India and released a critically acclaimed 1995 memoir. But Cleo too has passed away in 2001, leaving a legacy as an early documentarian of the rock and roll lifestyle. Chris O'Dell.
Grew up in an era of free love, flower power, sex, booze, drugs, and rock and roll.
Chris O'Dell is one of those names that floats through every corner of classic rock history. The rare groupie who was also on the payroll. She started at Apple Records as basically the new kid answering phones, but somehow she ended up in the Beatles' inner circle. She even stood on the rooftop for their final performance in 1969, one of only a handful of people who actually witnessed it up close. From there, she became this behind-the-scenes powerhouse. She had a relationship with Ringo Starr, moved on to working with the Rolling Stones in '72, and then later became Bob Dylan's tour manager, and yes, involved with him too. She wasn't just hanging around rock royalty, she was working with them, traveling with them, shaping tours and chaos from the inside. George Harrison was so fond of her that he wrote Miss O'Dell about her in 1973.
And Benny can restore it, won't you call me Miss O'Dell?
One of the few Beatles-adjacent songs directly inspired by a real friend. Chris eventually stepped away from the rock circus. She got sober and built a career in social work. She published a pretty great memoir, Miss O'Dell, in 2009, giving one of the most respected, honest looks into what life was really like behind the music. Roxana Shirazi.
Television baby, my father's a knob and my mother's a tube.
Roxana Shirazi has one of the wildest backstories of anyone on this list, coming from a very traditional background in Iran before deciding to completely dive headfirst into the world of rock and roll after moving to the UK. It is a true fish-out-of-water story, but she quickly became a major fixture in the scene, especially once the 80s glam metal explosion was in full swing. She definitely had a type, because she was really drawn to the wild guys of Guns N' Roses, reportedly connecting with drummer Steven Adler and Matt Sorum, as well as keyboardist Dizzy Reed. But her connections didn't stop there. Roxana was clearly a key part of the whole Crew crowd, having a documented relationship with Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue and Tracy Guns of LA Guns, proving she was connected to the absolute core of the Sunset Strip sleaze rock movement. She later went on to detail her experiences and her life's journey in her book, making her a modern chronicler of the scene. Audrey Hamilton. Audrey Hamilton, her entry was almost incidental. She met Robert Plant in Dallas during Led Zeppelin's massive 1977 US tour. Despite both being married, she immediately joined the group, becoming Plant's tour bus wife, This intense, months-long liaison was classic 70s rock excess, but it had an abrupt, tragic end. The death of Plant's young son in 1977 caused the singer to instantly withdraw from touring and the public eye, ending the romance overnight. Her legacy lives on in Zeppelin lore. The album In Through the Outdoor contains the rockabilly track Hot Dog, which Audrey herself confirmed was inspired by her. Plant even mentioned her name on stage during the tour. She later had a child with Ace Frehley of Kiss, cementing her deep ties to rock royalty. The Audrey Hamilton, who was part of the 1970s rock scene, has maintained a very low public profile ever since. She has kept details of her life post-Zeppelin pretty private, living away from the media spotlight, but she is acknowledged as a key figure in the band's history. Britt Ekland. Britt Ekland, Swedish actress, Bond girl, all-around glamour icon, was the ultimate 70s rock and roll companion when she started dating Rod Stewart. This was right as he was breaking out of the faces and skyrocketing as a solo star. And suddenly, they were everywhere. Magazine covers, paparazzi shots, the it couple of the decade. But Britt wasn't just along for the ride, she was living the full rock star fantasy. Fast cars, designer fashion, private jets, luxury yachts, the works. Their whirlwind romance captured the public's imagination and became the blueprint for what a glamorous rock power couple looked like in the mid-1970s. Even after it ended, the images of them together still define that era of excess and style. Britt kept acting through the 80s and 90s, with appearances in films and TV, and she's always remained a cult favorite for her Bond girl era.
You and I will be this time next year.
Opposite sides of the world, most likely.
Britt Ekland is still celebrated for her fearless style and larger-than-life presence that made her a fixture of rock and roll lore. Catherine James.
And we used to go dancing at all the clubs, and I think I was like 15 by then.
Catherine James was a notable figure who moved within the elite scene of high-end fashion and rock during the late 1960s and early 70s. She was professionally recognized as a model for influential designers, including Ozzie Clark, and she personified the distinctive LA ethereal style that characterized the era's blend of bohemian freedom and glamour.
George Harrison, Mick Jagger, everybody was there. Everybody was in the living room playing music, and George was just
establishing significant connections with musicians like Jimmy Page and Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. Then her association with Graham Parsons further positioned her as an influential muse who moved fluidly between the influential circles of rock and roll culture. Sharon Arden. Okay, so this is the ultimate groupie to CEO story. Sharon Arden's connection to Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. It all started because her dad was Don Arden, one of the toughest managers in the music biz. So Sharon was working for the family business, and she was technically part of the crew. But once she and Ozzy got together, the relationship exploded. The twist is, when Ozzy got booted from Sabbath, Sharon didn't just stand by. She stepped up, became his manager, and turned him into the massive solo star we know today.
If only we could all just find serenity.
Forget just being a muse, Sharon became the boss. She took that initial industry connection and transformed the groupie concept into a lasting, highly successful, and sometimes chaotic partnership. Susan Day.
No, I know that it's true. Don't say that this is the end.
The relationship between Susan Day and David Cassidy, co-stars on The Partridge Family, provides a unique example of how on-screen chemistry fueled significant off-screen fascination. While their roles presented a wholesome fictional family dynamic, the immense popularity of the show and Cassidy's teen idol status led to persistent speculation regarding a potential romance between the two. This dynamic served as an intriguing in-house showbiz crush that enthralled fans, only to be acknowledged later in Cassidy's memoir.
They were teaching us in phys ed. Honest, I didn't even think I was paying attention.
Yeah, well, they teach you to beat up guys and they teach me to beat up cake batter. Why am I always...
He confirmed that Day harbored genuine romantic feelings for him. validating the audience intuition and cementing their complex professional and emotional connection as a noteworthy piece of pop culture history. Maureen McCormick's rock world phase.
What happened in school today?
Nothing, Dad. Zero. It started out terrible and got worse.
Now here's someone who really jumped from one world to another. Maureen McCormick, forever known as the perfect Marsha Brady. Once the Brady Bunch wrapped, she totally embraced the wilder side of the 70s LA scene, ditching her squeaky clean image to start mingling with the rock and music crowd. Her transformation from TV idol to a Sunset Strip regular, it was a huge shift.
Thoughts didn't mix, but I can take some time.
She was definitely part of that entire scene, having a famous relationship with comedian and musician Steve Martin back before he was huge. She eventually wrote a memoir where she spilled the details about those wild post-Brady years, confirming that even TV's most famous big sister got caught up in the rock and roll lifestyle for a bit. Julia Holcomb. Julia Holcomb became infamous in rock history for her relationship with Aerosmith's Steven Tyler, which began in 1973 when she was just 16.
Wanted to go, and I hoped that I would meet Steven. And when we met, it was like my world just came to a stop.
Because of legal complications, a guardianship arrangement was set up to allow her to live with Tyler, putting her squarely in the eye of the 70s rock storm.
I was underage, and he became my legal guardian. I lived with him in Boston.
The relationship was chaotic and highly publicized. Rumors of a house fire, pregnancy, and intense media scrutiny followed. And Julia's story later became a lens into the darker, often unregulated side of the rock lifestyle, showing just how wild and ethically complicated the rock scene could be. Julia has since stepped away from the spotlight and now lives a private life, occasionally speaking out about her experiences to shed light on the realities behind rock and roll's glamorous exterior. And there they were. These women weren't just along for the ride, they were shaping the culture from the inside, for better and for worse. Sometimes they inspired the greatest music ever made, and sometimes mistakes were made. They redefined what it meant to live life on the edge of fame. Whether they were writing books, sculpting legends, or setting fashion trends that still echo today, their impact on rock history is undeniable. So, which of these names do you remember hearing back in the day, seeing in the tabloids? Who do you think deserves more credit for their influence behind the scenes? And did I forget a famous groupie? Well, please get down in the comment section and tell me all your thoughts. What did I miss? What did I get wrong? If you enjoyed our wild video, please hit that thumbs up icon. It really helps our channel a ton and we certainly appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next show. But most importantly, I'm Nostalgic Nick, signing off from the backstage pass to memory lane.